Thank you so much for attending my PowerPoint presentation on Dark Souls' most evil characters. Patches is a recurring character across multiple From Software titles who has built his entire reputation on being what I can only describe as aggressively petty. His entire business model consists of luring players toward treasure, waiting until they're vulnerable, and then attempting murder through environmental hazards. Notably, his primary method of attack is kicking you off cliffs, not stabbing you, not casting spells. Kicking. This man has somehow survived multiple apocalyptic scenarios by perfecting the art of the push. The most infamous example occurs in the Tomb of the Giants, where Patches appears as a helpful NPC who definitely has your best interests at heart. He'll gesture toward some treasure, wait for you to approach, and then kick you directly into a pitch black abyss filled with giant skeletons. The Tomb of the Giants is already one of the most miserable locations in Dark Souls, requiring a light source just to see where you're walking. And Patches saw this hellscape and thought, you know what this needs? More victims. You can climb back up to confront him, at which point he immediately surrenders, offers a groveling apology, and becomes a merchant. Truly, the behavior of a man who stands by his convictions. But let's talk about the Catacombs Bridge incident, because this one requires premeditation. Patches doesn't just stumble upon a lever that controls a bridge. He positions himself next to it, waits for you to walk onto said bridge, and then pulls the lever specifically to rotate you into a pit of spikes and necromancers. This means he's been standing there, waiting, for however long it takes for some random undead to wander by. That's dedication to being an inconvenience. The best part? Players fall for this across multiple games. Demon Souls, Dark Souls 3, Bloodborne, Elden Ring. Same guy, same tricks, and people keep trusting him. If you get kicked off a cliff by Patches in 2025, that's on you. At this point, it's like touching a hot stove and being surprised by the burn. Patches isn't evil in the grand cosmic sense. He's not trying to end the world or torture anyone. He's motivated purely by greed and finding amusement in your suffering, which makes him less of a villain and more of an annoying coworker who steals lunches from the break room fridge. But he kicks people into skeleton pits for fun, so I guess that qualifies him for this list. Congratulations, Patches. You're evil in the most pathetic way possible. Next up is Lautrec. Knight Lautrec of Curium is a man who murders the Firekeeper at Firelink Shrine, which removes your ability to level up or rest at the game's primary hub bonfire. This is his contribution to the world. Not conquering kingdoms, not spreading plague, not consuming gods. He kills a defenseless mute woman who has done nothing but help you, steals her soul, and then leaves you to deal with the logistical nightmare of having no functional home base. His motivation for this crime? Collecting humanity for his goddess Fina, who is, and I cannot stress this enough, the goddess of love. Apparently, love in Korean involves murdering kind women and laughing about it. The laugh is really what sells Lautrec as a sociopath. It's this condescending nasal chuckle that he does after every sentence, like he's perpetually amused by your existence. You rescue him from a prison cell in the undead parish, which already should have been a red flag. Nobody gets locked up in Dark Souls for being a pleasant, well-adjusted individual. But you free him anyway. He shows up at Firelink Shrine wearing his golden armor that makes him look like a rejected Oscar statue, and then he murders Anastasia the moment you ring both bells of awakening. He does this specifically when you're away, because confronting you directly would require courage, which Lautrec does not possess. If you want to restore Firelink Shrine, you have to hunt him down in Anor Londo, invade his world, and kill him along with his two summons. Because of course he has backup. This man will murder a defenseless woman alone, but requires a full party to fight you. Even his equipment reflects his cowardice. He wears the Ring of Favor and Protection, which significantly boosts your stats. And guess what it does in PvP? It prevents backstabs. Lautrec built his entire character around not being punished for turning his back on people, which is just poetic. The funniest part is that players will still defend him. Oh, he's devoted to his goddess. It's complicated. No, it's not complicated. He killed a woman who couldn't speak or defend herself, stole her soul, and then laughed about it. His devotion to love involves premeditated murder. If that's love, I'd hate to see what he does to people he dislikes. But sure, keep telling yourself there's moral ambiguity here. I'm sure Anastasia would understand. Lautrec isn't evil on a cosmic scale. He's evil in the way that makes your day significantly worse and forces you to reorganize your entire playthrough. He's the guy who cancels plans last minute, except instead of canceling plans, he murders your leveling system. Truly inspiring. Moving on to Sullivan. Pontiff Sullivan is responsible for approximately 70% of the suffering in Dark Souls 3, and most players don't realize this because he hides behind the world's most convoluted middle management power grab in From Software. Stalwart history. Let me walk you through his resume. He corrupted the entire city of Irithyll, imprisoned Gwendolyn in the Anor Londo Cathedral, fed Gwendolyn to Aldrich over over an extended period of time to enable his ascension as a Lord of Cinder, created the Outrider Knights by deliberately corrupting them with beasts from the profaned capital, transformed the Dancer of the Boreal Valley into a mutated monster, and installed himself as the de facto ruler of Lothric's religious institutions through pure manipulation. This man saw the apocalypse happening and thought, I can make this about me. The Outrider Knights deserve special mention because this is where Sullivan's methodology becomes clear. He gave certain knights the Irithyll Straight Sword, which is a weapon infused with frost magic that slowly drives its wielder insane and transforms them into beasts. He knew this would happen. He did it anyway. Then he sent these knights out as exiles to spread his influence across the kingdom, knowing they would eventually lose their minds and become roaming monsters. It's like a multi-level marketing scheme, except instead of selling essential oils, you're selling body horror and madness. The Dancer was one of these knights, by the way. She used to be a person. Now she's a twitching abomination guarding the high wall, and it's because Sullivan decided her usefulness as a corrupted puppet outweighed her usefulness as a functioning human being. But the Gwendolyn situation is where Sullivan transitions from ambitious sociopath to actual monster. Gwendolyn was the last remaining deity in Anor Londo, maintaining the illusion of Guinevere and protecting what remained of the old god's legacy. Sullivan imprisoned him and then fed him to Aldrich, not quickly, slowly, over time. When you fight Aldrich, he's still eating Gwendolyn. You can see Gwendolyn's body in Aldrich's mouth during the boss fight. Sullivan enabled this because Aldrich, being a Lord of Cinder, gave Sullivan more political power. He sacrificed God to a cannibal for a promotion. And here's the thing, none of this was necessary. Sullivan could have just seized power directly, but no, he needed the elaborate schemes, the puppet strings, the corruption from the shadows. He's the kind of villain who writes a 47-step plan when steps 1 through 46 are optional. His boss fight is genuinely difficult, which almost makes you forget that his actual evil is bureaucratic. He's not a cosmic horror. He's middle management with delusions of grandeur and a willingness to feed people to other people to climb the corporate ladder. Next up is Nashandra. Nashandra is a fragment of Manus, father of the abyss, which means she is literally born from humanity's darkest impulses given physical form. She is the embodiment of want, desire, and greed, and her entire existence is predicated on consuming everything around her to fill a void that cannot be filled. Her method of choice, a centuries-long marriage built on psychological manipulation and emotional parasitism. Vendrick, king of Drangleisk, met this obvious dark entity radiating malevolent energy and thought, yes, this is wife material. Truly, the decision-making skills of a man who built a kingdom. Nashandra seduced Vendrick specifically to gain access to the throne of want and control the first flame. This wasn't a crime of passion or a sudden betrayal. This was a long con that spanned literal centuries. She married him, became queen of Drangleic, and then systematically manipulated him into pursuing a war with the giants to obtain their powerful souls. The giant invasion that destroyed half of Drangleic, Nashandra's idea. The golems built from giant souls that now wander the kingdom as hollow machines. Also Nashandra. She convinced Vendrick that conquering the giants was necessary for the kingdom's survival, when in reality, she just wanted their power for herself. It's the equivalent of convincing your spouse to take out a predatory loan so you can steal their credit cards. But the true horror of Nashandra isn't the political manipulation. It's what she did to Vendrick psychologically. As he began to realize what she was, she didn't stop. She continued the charade, slowly draining his will to exist. By the time you meet Vendrick in the undead crypt, he's a hollow shell, wandering in circles in a memory-soaked tomb, unable to even recognize you as a threat. Nashandra drove the most powerful king in the world to complete psychological collapse. She consumed his agency, his purpose, and his identity over the course of centuries, and when there was nothing left to take, she simply moved on to her next target. You. The funniest part is that Nashandra presents herself as helpful throughout Dark Souls 2. She's there in Drangleic Castle, giving you advice, encouraging you to pursue the throne of want. Players think she's an ally right up until she reveals herself as the final boss. And even then, she's kind of a disappointing fight, which almost feels appropriate. After all that buildup, all that manipulation, all that centuries-long relationship fraud, she's just another boss with predictable patterns and a relatively small health pool. Dark Souls 2's entire plot is a woman manipulates man into destroying kingdom, and the game treats this as a shocking revelation. Vendrick literally built a shrine to lock her out and filled it with warnings about the dark and those who seek the flame, and he still married her. Brother, the red flags were visible from space. Nashandra's evil is intimate and methodical. She doesn't destroy through raw power. She destroys through through patience, emotional exploitation, and an understanding that the most effective way to ruin someone is to make them do it to themselves. On to Aldrich, Devourer of Gods, started his career as a human cleric and ended it as a sentient pile of sludge made from the liquefied remains of everyone he's ever eaten. This is not a metaphor. Aldrich was a literal cannibal who consumed so many people that his body lost structural integrity and he became an amorphous mass of human remains that somehow retained consciousness and appetite. The man ate himself into becoming a slime monster, which is an achievement that requires both dedication and a complete disregard for basic biology. His title, Devourer of Gods, is not symbolic or exaggerated. When you fight Aldrich in Aenor Lundo, he is actively in the process of eating Gwyndolin. You can see Gwyndolин's body protruding from Aldrich's mouth during the entire boss fight. Gwyndolин's legs are dangling out while Aldrich uses his corpse as a puppet to cast miracles at you. And here's the best part. Gwyndolin is still alive during this. Aldrich has been force feeding on him for an extended period, keeping him conscious throughout the process, because Aldrich's consumption isn't just about sustenance, it's about the act itself. He doesn't kill and then eat. He eats while you're alive, and he takes his time. Before becoming a Lord of Cinder, Aldrich had visions of a deep sea age, an apocalyptic future where the world is consumed by an endless ocean. Instead of being horrified by this vision, Aldrich decided it sounded great and began eating people to make it happen faster. His dreams of a drowned world guided others to enable his consumption. Sulivan, recognizing Aldrich's potential as a Lord of Cinder, imprisoned Gwyndolin specifically to feed him. The Pontiff was essentially running a meal delivery service for a pile of sentient sludge. Aldrich became too obese to move under his own power, so other people had to bring him food. He's the Dark Souls equivalent of someone who refuses to leave their house and just orders delivery for every meal, except the delivery is God's, and the house is a cathedral. What makes Aldrich particularly grotesque is that consumption is his only motivation. He has no grand philosophy, no tragic backstory, no understandable goal. He eats because he wants to eat. That's it. He dreamed of an ocean and thought, I should eat more people about this. His progression from cleric to abyssal horror is just the natural result of unchecked gluttony meeting dark magic. He ate so much that he stopped being human and became a biological landfill with teeth. When you fight Aldrich, you're interrupting his meal. He's mid-bite on a god, and you're the inconvenience that's making him pause his eating. The fact that he can still fight effectively while digesting Gwyndolin suggests that multitasking is one of his few skills besides consumption. Aldrich isn't evil in a calculating way. He's evil in the way that a natural disaster is evil. He's a force of consumption that cannot be reasoned with, only stopped. And even then, you're really just killing what's left of him after he's already eaten himself into incoherence. Next is Nito, Gravelord. Nito is the first of the dead, which means he is literally the concept of death given physical form. He's not a villain who kills people. He is killing people. His entire existence is the embodiment of mortality, disease, and decay, and he administers this concept with the indifference of a natural force. The Tomb of the Giants, where Nito resides, is a mass grave containing the bodies of countless victims from the war against the dragons. These aren't organized burials or respectful memorials. This is just where the bodies ended up after Nito killed them with his death powers, which is exactly as subtle as it sounds. Nito is surrounded by a constant miasma of death and disease. Standing near him damages you passively because his presence is toxic to living things. His sword, the Gravelord sword, is made from his own body, which raises the question of whether Nito bleeds or if he just sheds bone fragments when damaged. The sword's description mentions it's imbued with the power of the Gravelord, which means Nito is handing out pieces of himself as weapons. It's like if death had a gift shop and everything in the gift shop could kill you. The Gravelord Servant Covenant exists to spread Nito's influence to other worlds. If you join this covenant, your job is to infect other players' games with stronger enemies, making their experience more difficult and deadly. Nito's idea of a gift to his followers is empowering them to make other people suffer. There's no deeper philosophy here. It's not about balance or natural order. It's just death spreading death, because that's what death does. Players keep trying to find nuance in Nito's motivations, as if death itself requires justification. He doesn't have a tragic backstory. He is the backstory. Every tragic death in Dark Souls leads back to him in some way, because he is where death started. During the war against the dragons, Nito killed countless enemies using clouds of death and disease. Not fire, not lightning, not sorcery, death. He just made things stop living through proximity, which is both the laziest and most effective combat strategy imaginable. The dragons were immortal stone beings, and Nito introduced them to mortality by simply existing near them aggressively. His contribution to the war effort was inventing the concept of dying, which the dragons were notably unprepared for. Here's the funniest part. Nito is an absolutely massive skeleton, easily 3 times your size, covered in smaller skeletons and bone fragments, residing in the darkest part of the darkest tomb in the game, and his boss fight is easier than the journey to reach him. You spend hours navigating the pitch-black tomb of the giants, falling off cliffs, getting killed by skeleton dogs, and dealing with the fact that you can't see anything. Then you finally reach Nito, the literal Lord of Death, and he's got a relatively small health pool and predictable attack patterns. It's like if the Grim Reaper showed up to your door and you beat him in rock, paper, scissors. The entire catacombs and tomb of the giants exist as Nito's domain, a sprawling underground necropolis filled with reanimated skeletons and the faint hope that you brought a light source. Nito doesn't actively manage this place. He just exists there, and death radiates outward from his position like a corrupted Wi-Fi signal. He embodies death as a concept, which means he's not malicious. He's indifferent. He doesn't hate you. He doesn't even notice you. You're just another thing that will eventually stop moving, and Nito has infinite patience. Moving on to Seath. Seth the Scaleless betrayed his entire species to Gwyn during the war against the dragons because he was born without scales and was jealous that the other dragons were immortal while he wasn't. This is the core motivation for his actions. Petty jealousy elevated to genocidal collaboration. He gave Gwyn the information needed to kill the everlasting dragons, was awarded the title of Duke for his treason, and then spent the next several centuries conducting horrific experiments on kidnapped women in pursuit of the immortality he could never naturally possess. His entire character arc is insecure about physical appearance, commits war crimes about it. The Duke's archives, Seath's research facility, is filled with the evidence of his experiments. The Pisaka are his most notable creations, humans who were subjected to such extensive experimentation that they were transformed into blind, slug-like creatures with octopus tentacles growing from their heads. These used to be maidens. Seath kidnapped them, brought them to his archives, and performed procedures on them until they stopped resembling anything human. The Pisaka can still scream, which suggests they retained enough consciousness to understand what was done to them. Seth's research notes don't express remorse or hesitation. He documented their transformations with clinical detachment, treating body horror as data collection. Priscilla, the half-dragon hybrid locked away in the painted world of Ariamis, is heavily implied to be Seath's daughter, which means his experiments on maidens weren't just about crystal research or immortality. They were also reproductive experiments. Seath was trying to create a version of himself that possessed the traits he lacked, and the method involved forced hybridization with human subjects. The fact that Priscilla was exiled to a painted world suggests that even Gwyn, who tolerated Seath's research for centuries, found this particular outcome unacceptable. Big Hat Logan, the greatest sorcerer in Dark Souls, follows Seath's research path and goes completely hollow from it. Logan idolized Seath's crystalline sorceries, studied his work obsessively, and the knowledge drove him insane. By the time you find Logan in the Duke's archives, he's naked, attacking you on sight, and has lost his grip on reality. Seath's research doesn't just destroy the subjects of his experiments, it destroys anyone who studies it too closely. The knowledge itself is corrupting, which makes sense when you consider it was developed by someone who went insane pursuing immortality he achieved, but could no longer enjoy due to his madness. The crystal caves where Seath resides are visually stunning. They're filled with glowing crystals, invisible pathways, and bioluminescent butterflies. It's one of the most beautiful locations in Dark Souls, which makes it perfect as Seath's domain. He built an elegant torture chamber, a place where horror is aesthetically pleasing and suffering is architecturally integrated. The crystals aren't just decorative, they're the result of his experiments, grown from the bodies and souls of his victims. You're walking through a graveyard that sparkles. Seath achieved immortality through the primordial crystal, a fragment of the ancient dragon's power. He got what he wanted, he became unkillable, was granted a duchy, and had unlimited resources to pursue his research. And it still wasn't enough. He went insane from jealousy and obsession, spent centuries torturing innocent people, and created nothing of value except more suffering. His science was just torture with documentation. His legacy is body horror, and his contribution to the world was teaching everyone that immortality isn't worth having if you lose your mind in the process. His core motivation was vanity. He wanted scales. He wanted to be like the other dragons. And when he couldn't have that, he decided to make it everyone else's problem through institutionalized cruelty that lasted longer than most kingdoms. Seth the Scaleless, proof that insecurity and unlimited power are a catastrophic combination. Next is Moab, Lord of Blood, kidnapped his half-brother, Miquella, who appears as a child, kept him in a cocoon in his underground palace, and attempted to force him into a marriage consort relationship to create a new dynasty. This is not subtext. This is not ambiguous lore that requires interpretation. Mohg's remembrance and associated items explicitly state that he abducted Miquella with the intention of raising him to full godhood as his consort. This is grooming. This is pedophilic behavior documented in item descriptions. From Software, a company famous for vague lore and morally gray characters, made Mohg unambiguously evil, and players still try to find a sympathetic sympathetic angle. There isn't one. Mog built the Mogwin Palace entirely around this kidnapping. The entire location is a blood cult dynasty centered on his obsession with Miquella. The palace is filled with rivers of blood from sacrificial victims, Albinorics who are bled to death in massive pools to fuel Mog's power. The Sanguine nobles, his loyal followers, execute these rituals continuously. The architectural design of Mogwin Palace exists to facilitate mass blood sacrifice on an industrial scale. It's not a castle, it's a processing facility for turning living beings into power. And at the center of it all is Mokella's cocoon, where Mog keeps his kidnapped child brother like a trophy. Mog was born an omen, which means he was cursed from birth and imprisoned beneath Lanedell in the sewers along with other omen. This is tragic backstory material. This is the kind of origin that typically creates a sympathetic villain in From Software games. But Mog took his cursed blood, made contact with the formless mother outer god, and decided that the best use of his newfound power was kidnapping a child for forced marriage. His suffering didn't create empathy. It created a monster who inflicts worse suffering on someone completely innocent. The fact that he had a horrible childhood doesn't excuse what he's doing to Miquella. It just makes it worse because he knows what it's like to be imprisoned and powerless, and he chose to do the same thing to someone else. The Var questline leads you directly to Mog's service. White Mask Var, the first NPC you meet in Elden Ring who calls you maidenless, recruits you into Mog's blood cult. You perform rituals, invade other players, and eventually gain access to Mogwin Palace as a follower. The game lets you join this organization, serve this character, and participate in his blood dynasty, which makes the final revelation of what Mog is actually doing hit harder. You are working for a cult leader whose end goal is the ritualized grooming of a demigod child. Mog's boss fight is one of the hardest in Elden Ring, which feels appropriate. His moral depravity is matched by his mechanical difficulty. He has two phases, bleeds you continuously, sets the entire arena on fire with blood flame, and has an unavoidable curse attack that requires a specific item to counter. Fighting Mog is miserable, which mirrors the revulsion you should feel learning about his motivations. There's no philosophical debate to be had here. There's no, from a certain point of view, argument. Mog kidnapped child, built a blood cult around it, and his plan was to force that child into marriage. This is horror movie villain behavior transplanted into a From Software game. Other villains on this list have complexity. Patches is annoying. Lautrec is a coward. Sulivan is ambitious. Nashandra is manipulative. Aldrich is gluttonous. Nito is indifferent. Soth is vain. But Mog is just evil. Explicitly, unambiguously, indefensibly evil. From Software finally made a villain with no redemptive qualities, no tragic misunderstanding, and no moral gray area. And he's at the top of this list because there's no competition. Kidnapping and grooming a child places you in a category of villainy that none of the others can reach, no matter how many people they've eaten or betrayed or murdered. In conclusion, Dark Souls features some truly despicable individuals across its various titles, and you should absolutely play them. If you enjoyed this, check out Dark Souls' Most Disturbing Facts: Peace on Planet Earth.